2004 Volvo V70. Looks like someone got separated from the rest of the funeral procession. Alright, whose aunt does this belong to? Somebody needs to come and get her. Alright kids, I'll be ready for church just as soon as I change my stockings because bodies were created by God, but bare legs are the work of the devil. Look at me in my sensible shoes and modest dinner portions. My intestinal walls have the structural integrity of a man-witch. I only send texts when we get separated in the department store, and then I call when you take longer than 15 seconds to respond. Oh look, here come the rest of your 7 cousins pouring out of the Volvo. Can't you just feel your nurples getting purpled already?
Hi, it's Brian. The giveaway for the BMW Z3M Roadster ends next Wednesday, so click on the link in the description or go to go.getentertowin.com/regularcars, buy a mug or a digital download. This is the second to last giveaway in an unknown time. We got one more giveaway after this, but this is the second to last one, so if you want the opportunity to win a convertible Roadster, bone stock too, except for the box said 10 horsepower air intake, then click on the link in the description, buy a mug or a digital download, and thank you for supporting Regular Car Reviews. Someone's going home with this car next Wednesday.
Okay, so this is ostensibly a family car, and arguably for young families, because it's eminently affordable with interior space and fuel economy that begs to be taken on a road trip. The Volvo V70 is supposed to be a car that justifies why this Swedish automaker survived while the cooler one didn't. It should be a slam dunk, but this is like driving a stomach ache. And okay, these aren't made to be fun, they're made to last, and under normal circumstances, that's all that would matter about this V70. It would get a good grade on that alone. But at what point does a poor driving experience create diminishing returns on a car's practicality? Can a good daily truly be a good daily when driving it has you looking up bus schedules? Well, I'm the Roman. This is Race to the Bottom, and for my birthday, we drive a 2004 Volvo V70, which is certainly a car, I'll give it that. Happy birthday to me, happy birthday to me, this is working my last nerve and I'd rather drive something else. 2004 Volvo V70. Remember when you couldn't get Gmail without a referral? This car is like an afternoon spent trying on pants. I'm burning daylight here trying to find a pair of slacks to wear to Dad's corporate picnic when there's no other kids my age and everybody manning a grill is doing it for the first time. The engine here is a 2.4-liter 5-cylinder, making somewhere in the ballpark of 138 horsepower and 160 pound-feet of torque from factory, and I'd honestly be shocked if it's making anything close to that now. While it's regarded by some as one of the sturdiest engines of its day, this never feels like it was made for performance, really. Just the unglamorous business of operation, and that's okay. For that, it deserves at least some credit. But even as someone who doesn't make a point of wanting to go fast all the time, this was rough. It doesn't help that this engine is matched to the most sluggish 5-speed automatic this side of a Smart 4.2 trying to rev match in a giant vat of butterscotch. And you know, I'm wondering if it's just an issue with Volvo's P2 platform, which, depending on your side of the argument, is either an underrated gem of a platform that is mistakenly misnomered as a Ford when Volvo actually designed the platform years before the Ford acquisition, or it's a poorly made bucket of bolts and mounts in steep decline that has neither the durability of the P1 nor the sophistication of the P3. And from what I have experienced, I feel like I'm likelier to align myself with the naysayers, unfortunately, if for no other reason than that there was effort in every act of operation. This steering is so heavy for no reason. My old Kia Rio with no power steering was more enjoyable to drive than this. And I'm here like some kind of a jerk just mashing a pedal that gives me nothing. Oh, you'll get up to the speeds you need eventually, but you're gonna do it on Volvo's time. Yeah, this is a 20-year-old car, but this feels significantly older. Significantly older. If you'd have told me this was a competitor with the Cutlass Sierra, I would have believed you. The Volvo V70 is a car that exists to collect stickers like a refrigerator and hold groceries like a refrigerator and require special parts to fix when it's more sensible to just replace it entirely like a refrigerator. What can I say about the Volvo V70 that hasn't already been said about the Maytag left out on the first Friday of the month for bulk pickup? Driving this delivers all the visceral excitement of reading the terms and conditions all the way through. This car feels old, but not in a way that implies experience or refinement. It's just, it feels lazy. Like, we gave you good fuel economy, we gave you plenty of room. I thought this was what you wanted. What else are you expecting us to do here? I don't know, Volvo. More than this. More than the bare minimum. You know, this car is like a guy who gets married and then announces he's officially retired from doing oral, when he was never even good at it anyway. Like, we're not hanging up number 23 here, Jason. You're not going to just be congratulated for doing the bare minimum. And I could forgive this all in the name of a better interior, but these needlessly light, flimsy doors open up to seats that were so stiff that Drew, our wonderful volunteer, had to use conditioner to massage them into some kind of sittable texture. All this to experience an engine and transmission combination as robust as the music of the Captain and Tennille, the high fructose corn syrup of the pop charts. And like high fructose corn syrup, the Volvo V70's value is largely in its role as a replacement for something better, if you can say that an excess of sugar is a good thing. But you see, the thing is, I keep reading that the Volvo 5-cylinder is supposed to be this amazing power plant, that it's supposed to be incredibly durable and versatile, and like not even the turbo, they're just talking about the bog standard 5-cylinder. And I honestly feel like I'm going crazy here. Am I really so out of touch that I can't find anything worth applauding here other than, say, this second generation having nearly 4 inches over its predecessor's wheelbase and 2.5 extra inches in height over the first gen? Yeah, interior space is important for Drew. He has a big family, and he wanted to be able to drive that family comfortably on the 12-hour road trip to see other family. I commend him for taking his family into consideration when so many enthusiasts would just keep driving whatever made them happy and to hell with everyone else. He gave up his Charger for this, and now he has a car that has not only served as a family car, but as a work vehicle as well, since there's a lot of cargo room and the seats fold down, and his average fuel economy is just under 28 miles per gallon in his experience, so I can't really say he made a bad call here, even if the car feels like it'd be right at home on the rack of toy sedans by the pharmacy checkout. But again, I was surprised to do the research after having driven the car, as I was expecting at least some opinions to align, but all I found was that this is apparently one of the better economy offerings of the early 2000s, and I'm sorry, but what am I missing here? Does a car have to be enjoyable to drive to prove its worth? Not really, because not every car is put on this earth to be fun to drive. There are a lot of experiences in general that exist for no other reason than that they have to get done, you know? Nobody wants to have to clean their bathroom or do their taxes, but they do it anyway because it's part of the necessity of adult living. I don't know that anybody wants to drive a Volvo V70, but it's what you do because it's responsible. It's a good family car, it doesn't cost a lot of money, and it'll get you where you need to go for a reasonable price because it has better than average fuel economy, even taking into account that it's from 2004. It's supposed to be reliable. It's supposed to be a good car. Yeah, well, guess what? This one isn't. I'm sure everyone else's is just fine, but for whatever reason, this is a pain burrowing inside of my asshole. And look, you could probably say, oh, it's not that bad. Come on, you're being dramatic. No, don't shoot me in the face and then tell me it's just a flesh wound. This is exhausting. It's exhausting to have to sit here and think that there has to be something I'm missing, something I have to be getting wrong, because I can't possibly sit here and have this opinion when so many others feel the exact opposite. The feeling that I'm going to get ripped to shreds and left out to fester under a sun that beats relentlessly on these hot-ass streets. And maybe I should call Drew and ask if I can drive it again and try to find some measure of compromise in the burning echo chamber of my own mind. But you know what? I just don't care. I shouldn't have to police my own tone just to avoid getting flamed by whatever Volvo fanboys exist. And do they even exist? I don't know. However, I feel like a lot of people who defend bad things are reasonable people because they aren't under some delusion that the thing they're defending is actually good. They just acknowledge that this bad thing speaks to them and perhaps only them, and they're prepared to live on an island alone with that opinion because that's what it means to plant your flag on a lonely hill. And from that desolate soil blossoms the flower of online discourse as social media becomes the Chuck E. Cheese for performative exclusion, where the only thing that drowns out judgment for liking the wrong thing is upvoted posts about how this wrong thing is actually super underrated and why aren't people talking about it more. That's what having an opinion on the internet is. It's recognizing that there is no such thing as an unchallengeable opinion. So for every claim that the V70 is an awful car, you'll get just as many who will go into the cold, rigid earth with a blessing on their lips for Darth Volvo. But let me clarify one thing, right here and now. For whatever its faults or virtues, and despite my actually getting kind of worked up over this car didn't make my life materially worse the longer I drove it, even if I didn't enjoy it at all. Yes, I found myself gripped by abject misery in a car that I'll never drive again, but a car that, if I'm looking at the big picture, is ultimately harmless. If you need an average car you could have for cheap, this would make a good option, but you would have to accept that you were getting the car for its utility first, and enjoyability wouldn't really enter into the equation. But at the end of the day, that's what responsibility is. Not resenting the things you have, but understanding that loving what you have comes secondary to being grateful that you have them in the first place. You have a car that works, even if only barely. There are a lot of people who don't even have that. So that's my devil's advocacy for this Swedish meatball of a car. Until you look at it from a cost-benefit standpoint. Yes, this will be durable, but you either need the money or the know-how to keep it that way. And while, yeah, that's true for a lot of cars, it goes double for something you can't just use any old parts for. This is the second generation V70, which came out during the Ford acquisition years from 1999 to 2010. Sure, the P2 platform this runs on was developed prior to the Ford acquisition, but who was manufacturing it during this second generation V70? So yeah, if you ever want to replace anything, it'll be $500 minimum because you have to use Ford Bosch parts, at least that's what Drew tells me. It ties into the old saying that $1,000 is not a lot of money to have, but it's a lot of money to owe. And how often are you going to need $1,000 or more to fix whatever new problem pops up for what's supposed to be your cheap beater? Now, part of the reason this wagon isn't completely irredeemable can be credited to the work Drew has performed on this Volvo. He had the entire fuel system replaced because some part or another broke, but no shop he took it to could figure out which part, so they just did the whole thing. The timing system was replaced too, but some things were just left alone. The sunroof is stuck closed, for example. And for whatever reason, this car basically eats headlights, so that's a constant change. And then there's the tint, which the dealer talked him into. Drew told the dealer repeatedly that he didn't want an illegal tint, but they kept claiming it'd make the car appear more youthful and it would protect the interior from wear. And I can't even blame him, because dealing with used car salesmen is a hassle in itself, and at some point you just want to get it over with. So they took him right up to the edge of legality, and this is your tint. And it all keeps coming back to the question rolling around in my head, compelled by my general love of Saab and my, until now, fairly neutral stance on Volvo. Why did Volvo survive, but Saab didn't? Why did the innovative and quirky Swedish automaker fall by the wayside while its more boring cousin survives to this very day? Well, when Ford bought the automotive wing of AB Volvo in 1999 for some $6.5 billion, Volvo was a company that had enjoyed considerable success and staying power thanks to the Volvo 240 and the more recent, at least at that time, 850. Now, Saab had long made safety a part of their brand, but with the arrival of the 850, It was argued Volvo had outdone its Swedish brethren by delivering a car that many hailed as the safest of its day. In fact, not only was it the first production car in the world to offer side impact airbags, it offered all-wheel drive and ABS standard. And, this is almost insane to believe, the 1995 models all supposedly came with up to $250,000 in life insurance. So certain were Volvo that this car would keep you alive in an accident that they were willing to pay in the event you didn't make it. Now, I've only been able to find specifics by combing through forums, but from what I could find, it was a 5-year policy, and there were conditions, although I couldn't confirm what those conditions were. One would assume the policy would be null and void if you were driving under the influence, speeding, listening to Insane Clown Posse, or not wearing your seatbelt, all things that wouldn't factor into the car's ability to protect you. But either way, this just kind of seemed like an ambitious way of saying, we made something good and we know it. And the V70 was a seeming continuation of the 850, at least the first generation was. But you see, where in the post-refresh second generation, where the design philosophy was to create the, quote, front end of a Jaguar E-Type married to the back end of a Ford Transit van. It was a choice that essentially illustrated that in the early 2000s, it was basically an American pastime to try and alter what made Swedish automakers unique in the first place. But then maybe that's tied to the reason Volvo survived and Saab didn't. Ford was a better partner for Volvo than GM was for Saab, because Ford didn't really seem to want to change Volvo all that much relative to what they probably could have done. It wasn't until the global recession in 2008, which gave us such moments of sterling thought as cash for clunkers, that Ford tried to push Volvo upmarket now that they'd sold Jaguar Land Rover. But when the financial crisis worsened, Volvo Cars was sold to a consortium of Geely Holding, a China-based global mobility technology group, and Goldman Sachs, the worldwide investment firm. They sold it for around $1.8 billion, and when you consider, again, they paid nearly $6.5 billion to acquire it in the first place, Ford was looking at a loss in the ballpark of $4.7 billion, which is wild considering the dire financial straits of the American auto industry at this time. Yet even if the Ford years weren't always the most awe-inspiring for Volvo, there was a general sense of continuity with what came before in a way that there wasn't for Saab. The Saabs under GM, with few notable exceptions, didn't really feel like Saabs, whereas for better or worse, Volvos were still Volvos. They didn't need to innovate so much as remain consistent to the consumer base who were looking for cars they didn't need to worry about. Because there's something to be said for not appearing as though you're trying to make a statement with every car you drive. Sometimes you just want to drive somewhere that isn't directly to the nearest mechanic. Innovation is not a requirement for success. Hell, it's not even a requirement for long-term viability. Volvo has mostly remained in the public eye since they first got their big break in the United States in the mid-1950s. A good 15 years before the wider import boom really took effect in the wake of the 70s oil crisis. If Volvos were awful across the board, I'm not convinced they'd still be here. Granted, the automotive industry clearly isn't a meritocracy, but there has to be a willing consumer base for whatever it is you're selling in the first place. Volvo still has that base now, and somehow they had it in 2004. When they were putting out something I can't reasonably defend. A car that is genuinely one of the worst I've driven in 2024. Well done, Volvo. You absolute piece of shit. Okay, so this is going on the bottom 5. Where is it going to go? Well, first and foremost, let's get rid of the Hyundai Tucson Hybrid, which now graduates from the bottom 5. So congratulations, Will. Your car's out of the bottom 5. Which strangely means that now number 1, the car that I like the most out of the bottom 5, is what so far has been the second longest reigning champion of Race to the Bottom, the Jeep Grand Cherokee Laredo. It's just wild to me. And number 2 is the GMC Sierra 1500, just a really rough truck. Ooh, and then number 3, okay, yeah, I guess it would be this, actually. Sure, I got worked up about it a bit, but I don't know, it's mostly harmless. It's bad, but is it worse than the Dodge Journey? Not really, not to me. You know, the Journey was a 2019 car that felt like it came from 2010 at best. It's just an utterly baffling car to only be 5 years old. And the Nissan Sentra is still just awful. It has not been topped yet, or bottomed for me. So that's the bottom 5. And it's been a banner summer for bottom 5 cars on Race to the Bottom. I'd like to thank Drew for allowing me to review his car and actually encouraging the roasting. And if you think you have a car that can win the Race to the Bottom, email me at regularcarstheroman@gmail.com. Right now, we can only accept submissions from people willing to drive to us in southeastern Pennsylvania, but even if I don't respond to even half because I just don't have the time, I promise you I read every single email. Now, if you enjoy the video, if you enjoy this show, consider supporting us on Patreon. The link is in the description. Or like the video, subscribe, comment, or share it with someone you think might enjoy it. This show does not happen without you. Seriously, without you, our show is literally nothing. So thank you for watching, and have a wonderful rest of your week. And now I'm driving that V70, oh, 4's the year this thing's sold. So you're from Sweden and I know you're not Saab, you're Volvo. Sales will go up, down, down, do it like Konami code. So you're from Sweden and I know you're not Saab, you're Volvo.